Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Yo Boys Book Club. So, I don't know if this is working out. We'll see what's going on. Today, we're going to be doing Fahrenheit 451, Part 1. So, the first section of the book is titled One. The Hearth and the Salamander. It was a pleasure to burn. It was a special pleasure to see things eaten, to see things blackened and changed. With the brass nozzle in his fists, with this great python spitting its venomous kerosene upon the world, the blood pounded in his head, and his hands were the hands of some amazing conductor playing all the symphonies of blazing and burning to bring down the tatters and charcoal ruins of history. With his symbolic helmet numbered 451 on his stolid head, and his eyes all orange flame with the thought of what came next, he flicked the igniter, and the house jumped up in a gorging fire that burned the evening sky red and yellow and black. He strode in a swarm of fireflies. He wanted above all, like the old joke, to shove a marshmallow on a stick in the furnace, while the flapping pigeon-winged books died on the porch and lawn of the house. While the books went up in sparkling whirls and blew away on a wind turned dark with burning, Montag grinned the fierce grin of all men singed and driven back by flame. He knew that when he returned to the firehouse, he might wink at himself, a minstrel man, burnt cooked, in the mirror. Later, going to sleep, he would feel the fiery smile still gripped by his face muscles. In the dark, it never went away, that smile. It never went away, as long as he remembered. He hung up his black, beetle-colored helmet and boots. Come on. You gotta work with me a little bit. And shined it. He hung his flame-proof jacket neatly, he showered luxuriously, and then whistling, hands in his pockets, walked across the upper floor of the fire station and fell down the hole. At the last moment, when disaster seemed positive, he pulled his hands from his pocket and broke his fall by grasping the golden pole. He slid to a squeaking halt, the heels 1 inch from the concrete floor of downstairs. Come on, Booze. Come on, buddy. Hi-yah! He's a big baby. He just wanted picked up. He walked out of the fire station and along the midnight street toward the subway where the silent air-propelled train slid soundlessly down its lubricated flue in the earth and let him out with a great puff of warm air onto the cream-tiled escalator rising to the suburb. Whistling, he let the escalator waft him into the still night air. He walked toward the corner, thinking little at all about nothing in particular. Before he reached the corner, however, he slowed as if a wind had sprung up from nowhere, as if someone had called his name. The last few nights, he had the most uncertain feeling about the sidewalk just around the corner here, moving in the starlight toward his house. He had felt that a moment prior to his making the turn, someone had been there. The air seemed charged with a special calm, as if someone had waited there, quietly, and only a moment before he came, simply turned to a shadow and let him through. Perhaps his nose detected a faint perfume. Perhaps the skin on the back of his hands, on his face, felt the temperature rise at this one spot where a person standing might raise the immediate atmosphere 10 degrees for an instant. There was no understanding it. Each time he made the turn, he only saw white, unused, buckling sidewalk, with perhaps on one night something vanishing swiftly across a lawn before he could focus his eyes or speak. But now tonight he slowed almost to a stop, his inner mind reaching out to turn the corner for him. He heard the faintest whisper. Breathing? Or was the atmosphere compressed merely by somebody standing quietly over there, waiting? He turned the corner. The autumn leaves blew over the moonlit pavement in such a way as to make the girl who was moving there seem fixed to a sliding walk, letting the motion of the wind and the leaves carry her forward. Her head was half bent to watch her shoes stir the circling leaves. Her face was slender and milk white, and in it was the kind of gentle hunger that touched over everything with tireless curiosity. It was a look, almost, of pale surprise. The dark eyes were so fixed to the world that no move escaped them. Her dress was white, and it whispered. He almost thought he heard the motion of her hands as she walked. The infinitely small sounds now, the white stir of her face turning when she discovered she was a moment away from a man who stood in the middle of the pavement, waiting. The trees overhead made a great sound of letting down their dry rain. The girl stopped and looked as if she might pull back in surprise, but instead stood regarding Montag with eyes so dark and shiny and alive that he felt he had said something quite wonderful. But he knew his mouth had only moved to say hello. And then, when she seemed hypnotized by the salamander on his arm and the phoenix disc on his chest, he spoke again. "Of course," he said, "you're our new neighbor, aren't you? And you must be—" She raised her eyes from his professional symbols. "The fireman." Her voice trailed off. "How oddly you say that. I'd have known it with my eyes shut," she said slowly. "What, the smell of kerosene? My wife always complains," he laughed. "You never wash it off completely." "No, you don't," she said in awe. He felt she was walking in a circle about him, turning him end for end, shaking him quietly, and emptying his pockets without once moving herself. "Kerosene," he said, because the silence had lengthened, "is nothing but perfume to me." "Does it seem like that, really?" "Of course, why not?" She gave herself time to think of it. "I don't know." She turned her face to the sidewalk, going toward their homes. "Do you mind if I walk back with you? I'm Clarice McClellan." "Clarice?" "Guy Montag." "Come along. What are you doing out so late wandering around? How old are you?" They walked in the warm, cool, blowing night on the silvered pavement, and there was the faintest breath of fresh apricots and strawberries in the air. And he looked around and realized this was quite impossible, so late in the year. There was only the girl walking with him now, her face bright as snow in the moonlight. And he knew she was working his questions around, seeking the best answer she could possibly give. "Well," she said, "I'm 17, and I'm crazy. My uncle says the two always go together. When people ask your age," he said, "always say 17 and insane." Isn't this a nice time of night to walk? I like to smell things and look at things, and sometimes stay up all night walking and watch the sunrise." They walked on again in silence, and finally she said, thoughtfully, "You know, I'm not afraid of you at all." He was surprised. "Why should you be?" "So many people are. Afraid of firemen, I mean. But you're just a man, after all." He saw himself in her eyes, suspended in two shining drops of bright water. Himself, dark and tiny, in fine detail, the lines about his mouth, everything there in her eyes were two miraculous bits of violet amber that might capture and hold him intact. Her face turned to him now, was fragile milk crystal, with a soft and constant light in it. It was not the hysterical light of electricity, but what? But the strangely comfortable and rare and gently flattering light of the candle. One time, as a child, in a power failure, his mother had found it and lit a last candle, and there had been a brief hour of rediscovery, of such illumination that space lost its vast dimensions and drew comfortably around them. And they, mother and son, alone, transformed, hoping that the power might not come on again too soon. And Clarice McClellan said, "Do you mind if I ask how long you've worked at being a fireman?" "Since I was 20. 10 years ago." "Do you ever read any of the books you burn?" He laughed. "That's against the law." "Of course. It's fine work. Monday, Byrne, Millay. Wednesday, Whitman. Friday, Faulkner. Burn 'em to ashes, then burn the ashes. That's our official slogan." They walked still further, and the girl said, "Is it true that long ago firemen put out fires instead of going to start them?" "No. Houses have always been fireproof. Take my word for it." "Strange. I heard once that a long time ago houses used to burn by accident and they needed firemen to stop the flames. He laughed. She glanced over quickly. Why are you laughing? I don't know. He started to laugh again and stopped. Why? You laugh when I haven't been funny, and you answer right off. You never stop to think what I've asked you. He stopped walking. You are an odd one, he said, looking at her. Haven't you any respect? I don't mean to be insulting. It's just I love to watch people too much, I guess. Well, doesn't this mean anything to you? He tapped the numerals 451 stitched on his char-colored sleeve. Yes, she whispered. She increased her pace. Have you ever watched the jet cars racing on the boulevards down that way? You've changed the subject. I sometimes think drivers don't know what grass is, or flowers, because they never see them slowly. If you showed a driver a green blur, oh yes, he'd say that's grass. A pink blur, that's a rose garden. White blurs are houses. Brown blurs are cows. My uncle drove slowly on a highway once. He drove 40 miles an hour, and they jailed him for 2 days. Isn't that funny? And sad, too. You think too many things, said Montag uneasily. I rarely watch the parlor walls, or go to races, or fun parks. So I've lots of time for crazy thoughts, I guess. Have you seen the 200-foot-long billboards in the country beyond town? Do you know that once billboards were only 20 feet long? But cars started rushing so quickly that they had to stretch the advertising out so that it would last. I didn't know that, Montag laughed abruptly. Bet I know something else you don't. There's a dew on the grass in the morning. He suddenly couldn't remember if he had known this or not, but it made him quite irritable. And if you look, she nodded at the sky, there's a man in the moon. He hadn't looked for a long time. They walked the rest of the way in silence, hers thoughtful, his a kind of clenching and uncomfortable silence in which he shot her accusing glances. When they reached her house, all its lights were blazing. What's going on? Montag had rarely seen that many house lights. Oh, just my mother and father and uncle sitting around talking. It's like being a pedestrian, only rarer. My uncle was arrested another time. Did I tell you? For being a pedestrian. Oh, we're most peculiar. But what do you talk about? She laughed at this. Good night. She started up her walk. Then she seemed to remember something and came back to look at him with wonder and curiosity. Are you happy? She said. Am I what? He cried. But she was gone, running in the moonlight, her front door shut gently. So, that was an absolute interesting first chapter, or first section of a book, I must say. So we see, I'm guessing our main character, Guy Montag, at his job being a fireman, lighting fires in Fahrenheit 451 with kerosene. And on his walk home, he catches this girl because he feels a lingering sensation. So he turns the corner and catches her instead of just going on about his path. Weird. A little creepy. But it's fine. Weird. A little creepy. But it's fine. And then they have a nice little conversation where she kind of goes, why do you light fires? Why don't you read books? What do you mean? What do you, like, what? And Guy says that's against the law. I've never read this book, by the way. I do know the kind of premise. I didn't realize that, like, we're starting out with this is how things are. We love books like that. Anyway, if you enjoy this, make sure to check out my other videos. I got 1984 going on. I got about 4 parts of that going. I just, reading it aloud and talking about it a little bit after the fact. Same thing I'm doing here with Fahrenheit 451. So I hope y'all enjoyed. If you did, make sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment down below if you like the content. Always appreciated to see people interacting. So I hope you all have a great one, and I will see you in the next episode.